I'm Bethany Neary, and thanks for coming to my Blood Talk. I'm going to be talking about menstruation, and if that makes you uncomfortable, that seems like an issue on your part. I'm going to say the word period at least 200 times, because that's what it is. I'm not going to use a euphemism like Aunt Flo to make it more palatable for you. I'm going to be talking about blood. You'll also notice that I'm going to say people with periods instead of women. That's because not all women get periods, and not all people that get periods are women. It is key to be inclusive, period. As a person who has had their period for 10 years, I've become quite familiar with the whole process. But as a BuzzFeed article entitled 24 Things People Have Actually Believed About Periods proves, not everyone is so well informed. My favorite one from the list was where someone's boyfriend believed the period could be turned on and off like a tap. Boy, do I wish. To make sure we're on the same page, let's do a quick review. First, we have the parts, the uterus and the ovaries. The ovaries hold the eggs. The eggs travel along the fallopian tubes. And if the egg is fertilized, this is where a fetus is grown. As you can surmise, menstruation is about reproduction, but periods occur even when someone is not trying to conceive. Menstruation is a cycle of hormones that typically repeats every 25 to 35 days, or about once a month. I say typically because there's always room for variation. These hormones, which include progesterone and estrogen, cause the body to mature the eggs in the ovaries, release the eggs into the uterus, which is called ovulation, and make the lining of the uterus thick. If an egg is not fertilized, the uterus releases the lining, and this is the period. Most people with uteruses experience periods between puberty and menopause, so about 40 years. The period typically lasts 3 to 8 days, but it can be a little less or a little more. During a period, on average, the body releases 8 teaspoons of blood. And if you're thinking that's a little low, 1, shh, and 2, many people actually release up to 15 teaspoons of blood each cycle, which is about a quarter cup. There have also been reports of people releasing as much as 1 cup of blood each time. Crazy, right? Periods are typically accompanied by cramping and physical discomfort, with day 1 bringing the worst feeling. The list of symptoms is actually quite vast, and it includes bloating, nausea, diarrhea, back pain, abdominal cramps, fatigue, breast tenderness, irritability, mood changes, and much more. Different people experience their periods differently, but in general, it's not a fun time. PMS, or premenstrual syndrome, is the same symptoms, just a week earlier. If you're thinking, wow, that sucks, you're completely right. These symptoms, as well as the bleeding itself, can sometimes be mitigated by birth control. Some birth control stops the period, some makes it a trimester cycle instead of monthly, some birth control lightens the blood flow, and some have no effect on bleeding, but can improve mood changes and changes in appetite. Again, this all varies. What also varies is the method that people with periods use to deal with the bleeding. Tampons are disposable and are inserted into the vagina using an applicator. They expand to absorb period blood and feature a string for removal. Menstrual cups are small reusable rubber cups that are inserted into the vaginal opening and catch the blood. Good. Pads are an external protection that are adhered to the inside of a person's underwear to prevent the blood from staining clothes. And if you've ridden the subway anytime recently, you've probably also seen an ad for Thinks, which are a period panty that absorb the blood without the need for pads. There are also organic tampons and pads on the market, but these are a little more expensive. Yet even with protection, however, sometimes it bleeds through. If you see this happen, don't be grossed out and don't freak out. Just let the person know. While the choice of product is up to the individual, one reason to explore alternative options is the fact that mass-produced period products in the US are full of chemicals, just like everything else. One of the main chemicals is bleach, and this is used to clean the cotton fibers. But there are also endocrine disruptors that mess with the hormones in the body. 2 of these are BPA and phthalates, which are known carcinogens. While the levels are low, they're still there, and still potentially dangerous. The levels are higher in scented period products, and these can lead to TSS, which is a life-threatening condition, the result of bacteria that grows on tampons and creates harmful toxins. While TSS levels are low, it's still possible, and they can be mitigated by changing the tampon every 4 to 8 hours, depending on flow. So on a lighter note, What can people do while they're on their period? Anything they want to. Exercise, sex, leading a country, it's all possible. Yes, I said sex. Gross? Grow up. Menstruation is a time when hormones are at their peak, and this can lead to an increased sex drive. The blood flow can be seen as an extra lubricant, and as blood is just another bodily fluid, it's really no different from the regular messiness of sex, though putting a towel down or taking it to the shower might be recommended. You should give a listen to the song Period Sex from the hit show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend if you're so inclined. Don't forget to use protection, however, because STDs and pregnancy are still a thing. Consent on behalf of the bleeding person is also a must. If the person who's on their period is not in the mood and they just want to skip the gym and stay home and watch movies, that is completely fine. If they want to continue to work hard or climb a mountain, that's also cool. It's no one's place to dissuade them. They may or may not be a little irritable in whatever they're doing, but by no means should you hit them with the age-old line of, "Geez, are you on your period?" This phrase is about as helpful as calling someone crazy or telling them to calm down while on the precipice of a fight. Don't do it. Just don't. This phrase speaks to a huge stigma surrounding periods, and while the immediate reaction may be to punch the nearest wall, or worse, a person's face, it needs to be unpacked. I have been asked this question 4 times in my life by 4 cis men, and I was only on my period one of those times. In that situation, I was in a group project in high school, and I expressed irritation that my group members had not pulled their weight. One kid asked me the question. In response to the question, I immediately clammed up, denied it, and stayed silent for the rest of the meeting. Even when I haven't been menstruating, though, that question has stopped me in my tracks. The possibility of bleeding and being on my period immediately invalidates my stance and any of my opinions in the eyes of people that have not experienced a period. You might be wondering why I'm asking you to not ask this question while I'm giving a talk about opening up the conversation. It's because there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. Are you on your period is not a question about concern. It's a way to undermine people. Silence should not always be the answer, however. A poll commissioned by Thinks earlier this year found that 58% of women across the country had felt embarrassed about their period, and this is likely because 51% of men said it was inappropriate for women to talk openly about their periods. 73% of women polled also admitted to hiding their period products on the way to the bathroom. Funny story about that. I remember being in middle school and taking my purse with me to the bathroom to consume my pad. My male teacher saw this and loudly goes, "Why are you bringing your bag to the bathroom?" I immediately got embarrassed, sat down, and didn't go to the bathroom, so guess what happened? I bled through my pad. I guess that story wasn't so funny. But that story is indicative of patriarchal society's response to menstruating bodies. For eons, the conversation has had to be held in hushed whispers, and there's been a shame around it. We've all had to deal with going to the CVS and getting the uncomfortable looks from the cashier when we're buying our tampons, but it gets much worse. In some cultures and religions, a menstruating person is seen as dirty. And in Nepal, there's the practice of chadi, which involves sending the menstruating person to an isolated hut until they're done menstruating. This was outlawed in 2017, but it surely still goes on. Lack of access to period products is a result of the ignorance of the society. For example, tampons are very rare in many countries because of archaic beliefs, and this points to a lack of comprehensive sex education around the world. That's a whole other talk to be had. The taboo is exemplified by the fact that in the year 2015, China produced 85 billion pads and not a single tampon. Even pads are not available everywhere, and people use whatever they can. In a woman's health profile entitled Around the World in 28 Periods, one young woman from Iran stated, "I sometimes actually had to use cut-up diapers or used cloth. You name it, I've done it." It is important to note that using cloth can lead to infection if they're not cleaned right, and this is another thing to worry about. In many developing countries, young people can't afford period products, and this in turn leads to them missing school. While there is no global statistic about period absenteeism, in Tanzania, it is reported that 1 in 5 young women miss school while on their periods. It's not that they don't want to learn, It's that the taboo surrounding periods is so strong that they can't go to school with bloodstained clothing. I wouldn't go either. But this period poverty is not confined to developing countries. In 2017, The Independent reported that 137,000 young women in the UK had missed school because they were on their periods and couldn't afford the products. In 2018, Monica Lennon of Scotland's Labour Party responded to this by pushing a bill that would end period poverty by providing free period products in schools, universities, and food banks. Nice, Monica. Some colleges in the US offer free period products, but the accessibility needs to be expanded, especially considering the large homeless population we have in this country. The US could do to learn from India's Padman, who, when seeing that his wife Shanti was using dirty rags for her periods, set about designing a simple machine that could produce affordable pads locally. His path was not always easy, as even his wife and mother were humiliated by him bringing the issue out in the open, but progress is not always easy. That said, it's not going to be easy to take away the period tax in the United States, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. What is the period tax, you say? Ah, yes. Well, here in America, period products are categorized as a luxury item instead of a necessity, and this means they are subject to sales tax. Viagra, however, is not. 9 states, these being New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Florida, Illinois, Minnesota, and Maryland, have all passed bills to exempt tampons from the tax, but the rest of the states that feature sales tax have not budged. This tampon tax is on top of the pink tax, which refers to the fact that personal care products typically used by women cost 13% more on average than stereotypically male products. In If Men Could Menstruate, Gloria Steinem suggests that we wouldn't have this problem if it were the men that got their periods. She wrote, "Sanitary products would be federally funded and free. Generals, right-wing politicians, and religious fundamentalists would all agree that menstruation, was proof that only men could serve God and their country in combat." She speaks the facts of a patriarchal society in which nothing is an issue until it is a man's issue. But what Steinem fails to realize is that men do get their periods. I'm talking about trans men, a community that is rarely addressed. Trans men are men, but uteruses do not care about gender expression. In a column for Self, trans model Kenny Jones discusses the challenges that periods pose for body dysphoria, especially as no one talks about getting a period if you're not a woman. He wrote, "In my eyes, a period was the opposite of masculine, and so my ego and internalized expectations of male dominance were enough to convince me to bottle it up and speak about it with no one. He was lucky to have a supportive mother, but not everyone is so lucky, and thus the conversation needs to be normalized." Jones eventually started taking testosterone, which typically stops the period in a few months, though it can take longer into treatment. While he no longer bleeds, he has said that he still feels period symptoms years into his medical transition. Further, not all trans men choose to start hormones, and non-binary individuals usually don't either. Period cramps are a pain, and there's no reason that this pain should be accompanied by the emotional stress of being rendered invisible. Jones's issue speaks to a larger problem of how period products are represented. You've noticed that throughout this talk I've said period products, but the actual market standard is feminine care products, because it is targeted towards cis women. The thing is, tying menstruation to femininity is outdated.
Uteruses are not feminine. They don't care about your race, your gender, your sexuality, your ability.
They will still ruin your favorite pair of underwear. While we're talking about representation, I feel it's important to note that period blood is not blue, despite what ads may want you to believe. These ads feature a cup of blue liquid being poured into a pad to show its absorbency. And while I get what they're trying to do, never have I ever needed a tampon to soak up a blue liquid. Blood is unsightly and gross, but if Neosporin and Band-Aid ads can show it, so should period ads. Fortunately, things are starting to look up, little by little. In 2017, Libresse released an ad entitled Period Normal, in which they showed the pain of period cramps, the fun of life, period sex, red liquid, and even a woman changing her pad. In 2018, the aforementioned Kenny Jones was featured in an ad for Pink Parcel, which is a UK-based tampon delivery service. Some period underwear comes in the form of briefs specifically for trans men, and Panty Prop has a lower price point, so it's more accessible to women specifically. #HappyPeriod is working to give more period products to homeless shelters, and Aunt Flo has a 1-for-1 model in which one pad is given away for every pad purchased. A quick Google search shows that there are companies that are trying to make the period experience better. You just have to look. That said, we can't just be happy with the current state of affairs. Giving this kind of talk should not be some kind of statement. People who have periods should not be embarrassed about a natural process. People shouldn't have to whisper their pleas to get a tampon, and those who can't afford it shouldn't have to go without. Everyone, regardless of gender expression, should be educated about periods. If cis men can have erections subsidized by the government, there's no reason conservatives can't support people's uteruses, considering how concerned they are with them during abortion debates. So what can we do? Talk about periods. Teach your kids about periods. Support people who have periods, who make art about periods. Donate products to worthy companies. And put your money towards companies that are trying to change this. Because in a capitalist society, your money is worth more than your word. Don't recoil at the sight of a colorful tampon, and don't ever call the situation gross. Blood is icky. Blood is messy. Yeah, but life is messy. Periods happen. Get over it. Period.